Connie Francis's life was filled with unexpected twists, some captivating, others deeply unsettling. While she excelled at singing and songwriting, she struggled to navigate the unique challenges of being an international superstar. Despite her meteoric rise to fame, she remained close to her brother George, who was a significant figure in her life. Tragically, in 1981, George's life was cut short under suspicious circumstances. As investigators delved deeper into the case, a series of shocking revelations began to emerge, including some startling truths about Connie herself. Born as Concetta Rosa Maria Franconero in Newark, New Jersey, Connie Francis spent her early childhood in Brooklyn before returning to New Jersey. She grew up in a culturally rich Italian Jewish neighborhood where she naturally picked up multiple languages, becoming fluent in English, Yiddish, and Hebrew. From an early age, it was clear to her family that Connie was extraordinary. Her father, George Franconero, was particularly invested in her future and made every effort to nurture her musical talent. Recognizing her potential, he enrolled her in music school, where she learned to play the accordion. Her vocal talent soon became evident, and she began showcasing her skills at various community events, including talent contests, pageants, lodge celebrations, church socials, and neighborhood gatherings. These early performances laid the foundation for what would become a storied career, driven by both her undeniable talent and her father's unwavering ambition for her success. At the time, Connie Francis was living through an innocent and unassuming phase of her life, unaware that fate had something extraordinary and challenging in store for her. After a series of setbacks in her career, she recorded a cover of the classic hit, Who's Sorry Now? While her team and father were convinced it could be a success, Connie herself wasn't a fan of the song. However, her father's decision was final, so she reluctantly went along with the recording. Initially, the release didn't make much of an impact. Everything changed on January 1st, 1958, when the song was featured on a popular television program. Within months, Who's Sorry Now became a massive hit, selling over 1 million copies and catapulting Francis into stardom. By April of that year, the song had reached number 1 on the UK singles chart and climbed to number 4 in the United States. With her newfound success, any thoughts of pursuing medical school were abandoned, and her path to fame as a music icon became crystal clear. She still needed some guidance, so her team introduced her to a new acquaintance, Bobby Darin, another rising star in the world of singer-songwriters. The two quickly began collaborating, exchanging creative ideas and writing songs together. Although their partnership had its share of arguments and clashes, much of their time was spent in light-hearted flirting. However, behind the scenes, an unseen presence observed them with a growing, burning fury. Francis found herself captivated by Darin, and the feeling was mutual. While there's no official record of the two ever being in a relationship, it was obvious to everyone around them that they were deeply in love. Francis's father, embodying the image of a stereotypical strict Italian father, strongly disapproved of Darin and his daughter's relationship. He made it his full-time job to keep them apart whenever possible, believing it would help Francis remain focused. However, despite his constant efforts, Francis's father was unsuccessful in keeping the two lovebirds apart, at least not at first. There were even rumors circulating that Francis and Darin were planning to elope after one of her shows. When her father caught wind of this scandalous gossip, he lost his temper. His demeanor shifted from stern to aggressive, and on one occasion he even chased Darin out of a building in a fit of rage. Connie Francis and Bobby Darin shared a romance filled with passion and heartbreak, but their love story was far from a fairy tale. Frances later confessed that Darin was the great love of her life, the one who truly captured her heart. However, one insurmountable obstacle stood in the way of their happiness: her father. A fiercely protective and controlling figure, her father vehemently disapproved of Darin, creating an unyielding barrier between the two lovers. As much as Frances longed to be with Darin, her loyalty to her father ultimately won out, leaving her no choice but to sacrifice her relationship. Heartbroken, she channeled her emotions into her music, pouring her unfulfilled love into the lyrics of her songs. Yet moving on was anything but simple. The depth of her feelings for Darin lingered, casting a bittersweet shadow over her personal and professional life. While Connie Francis was trying to move on from Bobby Darin, she was blindsided by a devastating announcement. While driving with her father, the car radio suddenly broadcasted the news that Darin was getting married. The revelation hit her like a ton of bricks, leaving her heartbroken. To make matters worse, her father reacted with visible joy, happy to hear the news that separated her from Darin for good. This emotional overload pushed Frances to a dark place. In her diary, she poured out her anguish in chilling detail. She vividly described her heartbreak and overwhelming anger, even admitting to having sinister thoughts in that moment. In one particularly harrowing entry, she confessed that she wished the Hudson River would flood the Lincoln Tunnel, drowning both herself and her father. It was a stark reflection of the depth of her despair and how deeply the moment had shaken her. But Frances had no idea that a reunion with Bobby Darin was imminent. Despite the fact that Darin had married Sandra Dee, Connie Francis still held onto her feelings for him. In her memoir, Frances revealed the shocking and sordid circumstances under which they reconnected. Darin, grappling with his wife's serious gambling addiction, had sent Sandra away and invited Frances to meet him at his hotel room. Frances admitted to feeling a mix of excitement and hope as she prepared to see him again, eager to comfort him during his marital struggles. However, nothing could have prepared her for what awaited behind the suite's doors. When they opened, Frances found Darin completely unclothed, accompanied by two women fawning over him. The moment shattered her expectations, leaving her with a story far different from the reunion she had envisioned. No doubt devastated, Frances still managed to fire back at her father with a sharp, sarcastic remark. "So glad to see your mojo is still working. Very, very nice." Darin's response, however, was unforgettable. Caught in such an awkward and ridiculous position by his old love, Darin shouted back at Frances, "Bad timing, baby. The freaking worst. This has got to be a setup, and when I find the mastermind, he dies." The situation quickly spiraled into chaos, and in the midst of it all, Frances fled the scene, shouting at Darin to calm down. He even warned him that if he didn't, he might have a heart attack. Given Darin's tragic end, those words strangely seemed to carry an eerie sense of prophecy. Connie Francis began to have serious doubts about her relationship with Bobby Darin, not only because of his self-centered tendencies, but also due to the ever-present shadow of Sandra Dee, which added tension and complexity to their bond. The situation became increasingly unbearable, and the emotional toll was undeniable. While the two worked together on the TV series This Is Your Life, Frances reached a turning point. She realized that despite the pain it would cause her, the relationship needed to end. Determined to reclaim control over her life, she resolved to sever ties with Darin once the show wrapped up. It was a painful decision, but one she made with resolve, embracing her independence and prioritizing her well-being. Although Who's Sorry Now catapulted Connie Francis to fame, maintaining her spot at the top proved challenging. Her subsequent singles failed to replicate the same level of success, prompting her to collaborate with Neil Sedaka and Howard Greenfield, renowned songwriters known for their ballads. When they began working together, they engaged in lengthy discussions about which songs would best suit her style and audience. Privately, Frances poured her candid thoughts about the ballads into her diary, keeping her opinions away from direct confrontation. When Sedaka and Greenfield inquired about her writings, she tactfully declined to share them. Instead, she offered a diplomatic critique, stating that their ballads were over-sophisticated for the younger generation. Frances expressed a preference for more upbeat, lively songs that resonated better with her youthful audience, delicately steering the collaboration in a direction she felt would be more successful. The writers had a song in mind, but were hesitant to share it, thinking the lyrics might offend Frances. However, with nothing left to lose, and since Frances disliked all the other options, they decided to take a chance. After a long day of frustration, Connie Francis was exhausted but agreed to give Sedaka and Greenfield one final opportunity. Sedaka began to play a song titled Stupid Cupid. To their surprise, Frances was immediately impressed, declaring it her next hit. And she wasn't wrong. The song became a chart-topping success, cementing her status as a global star and giving her career a significant boost. Frances didn't just reach the peak of her fame, she shattered it. But with this new level of success came a fresh challenge: acting. The production team behind Where the Boys Are was eager to feature one of her songs in the movie's soundtrack. Frances agreed, but she didn't stop there. She also starred in the 1960 film. The movie centered around a quiet town that transforms into a popular spring break destination for college students. Through this film, Frances vividly portrayed the wild and scandalous possibilities of spring break, marking a bold new chapter in her career. In 1963, after completing her film project, Connie Francis met Dick Canellis, a press agent and entertainment director. Their whirlwind romance quickly blossomed, and within a year they decided to take the next step. On a warm summer day in 1964, the couple exchanged vows, hoping for a bright future together. However, the honeymoon phase didn't last long. Cracks in their relationship began to surface soon after, revealing deeper issues that neither could ignore. By the time winter arrived, their marriage had unraveled, leading to their separation just months after tying the knot. It was a brief and turbulent chapter in Frances's life, but romance wasn't finished with Connie Francis just yet. At the age of 32, she met Izzy Moran, a charming businessman and owner of multiple beauty salons. Moran was instantly smitten, and their whirlwind romance quickly led to marriage. This union marked the second marriage for both Frances and Moran. The couple exchanged vows in a heartfelt ceremony at St. Osa's Church, followed by an intimate and elegant reception held at Frances's home in Essex. The event was a reflection of their blossoming love, celebrated by close friends and family in a warm and joyous atmosphere. Even though this marriage lasted longer than Frances's previous one, it still didn't make it to the 1-year mark. After only 10 months together, Connie Francis and Moran mutually decided that their time as a couple had come to an end. They finalized their divorce in 1971, marking yet another chapter in Frances's turbulent personal life. Once again, she found herself alone, but solitude didn't last long. 2 years later, in 1973, she met Joseph Garzilli, a successful restaurateur. Unlike her previous short-lived relationships, Garzilli would become a steady presence in her life, managing to remain by her side for more than just a few fleeting months. At that point, Frances remained unhesitant about rushing into marriage. She and Garzilli tied the knot in 1973, marking the beginning of their life together. This year would also prove to be the last time Frances experienced any real peace. It seemed like the calm before the storm, as the turbulence that would follow began to loom on the horizon. On the night of November 8, 1974, Connie Francis's life took a harrowing turn. While staying at the Howard Johnson's Motor Hotel in Westbury, Long Island, her world was upended by a terrifying break-in. A stranger forced his way into her room, and what followed was a nightmare. The intruder approached Francis with malicious intent, leaving her frozen in fear. What began as a robbery escalated into an assault so violent and invasive that it left her scarred both physically and emotionally. By the time morning came, the scene was devastating. When authorities arrived, they found Francis bound to a chair, a sight that shocked even the seasoned officers. The attack marked a pivotal and deeply traumatic moment in her life, casting a shadow that would linger for years. This chilling incident not only left Francis grappling with the aftermath, but also brought significant changes to her outlook and future. Connie Francis later opened up about that terrifying night, providing a detailed account of her thoughts and emotions during the ordeal. She recalled thinking, "How could I be pulling this off? I mean, I talked to him like he was a human being having problems with a job. Why do you have to do this?" It was a desperate attempt to connect with her attacker and perhaps humanize herself in his eyes. The situation was already unimaginably horrifying, but what stood out to Francis was the realization that one critical factor may have ultimately saved her life. She revealed that during the attack, she told her assailant that she was a famous figure. She believed this revelation might have discouraged him from taking her life, as he may have feared the intense media attention and thorough investigation her murder would have triggered. This small but significant moment of quick thinking, she believed, played a pivotal role in ensuring her survival. It was a chilling reminder of how a single detail could make the difference between life and death in such a dire situation. This traumatic near-death experience left Francis deeply shaken and battling a severe depression, while her team sprang into action, determined to uncover the truth and hold someone accountable. The first step was filing a lawsuit against the motel chain, accusing them of negligence for failing to provide sufficient security measures to protect their guests. The legal battle ended in a victory for Francis's team, as they reportedly won the case. However, despite their best efforts, not all matters found closure. The relentless search for the intruder who had caused such devastation ultimately led nowhere, leaving questions unanswered and a sense of justice unfulfilled. Sadly, there was yet another heartache awaiting Francis. While she was battling her mental health issues, the people she relied on for support let her down. Her father, who had always been strict and controlling, showed no compassion when she needed it most. Instead of offering comfort, he crossed a painful line by cruelly telling Francis that she had become damaged goods after what she had been through. This cutting remark broke her spirit and made her lose faith in one of the men she had once admired most. However, this was only the beginning, as Francis was soon to lose hope in another beloved figure in her life. The aftermath of this tragic event cast a long shadow over Francis's life, deeply affecting not only her mental health but also her marriage. She openly confessed that the overwhelming guilt and self-loathing she felt about what had happened consumed her daily. This guilt became a corrosive force in her relationship with her husband, driving an emotional wedge between them. Francis believed that much of this guilt stemmed from her strict Catholic upbringing, which instilled a rigid and unyielding sense of morality in her from a young age. She explained that this upbringing, particularly within the cultural framework of Italian families, amplified her feelings of shame and failure, leaving her to grapple with emotions she found nearly impossible to reconcile. The weight of her memories became unbearable, plunging Francis into a state of isolation and despair. She couldn't bring herself to return to the stage, a space that once brought her joy and connection with her audience. Even walking down the street became a daunting challenge, as she constantly feared the dangers lurking around her. Instead, she retreated entirely from the world, spending most of her days confined to her bed, watching television in an attempt to numb the pain. This seclusion only deepened her sense of helplessness. Her withdrawal extended beyond the public sphere and seeped into her personal life. She distanced herself from her husband, unable to face him or engage in their relationship. The once vibrant connection they shared was overshadowed by the heavy cloud of her emotional turmoil. Frances found herself in a vicious cycle of isolation, fear, and guilt, unable to break free from the haunting memories of her trauma. Her marriage, like every other part of her life, bore the brunt of the psychological scars left by this devastating chapter. The consequences of her struggles wreaked havoc on her personal life, ultimately tearing her family apart. Connie Francis, bedridden and still deeply mired in her suffering, had to face the devastating reality of her husband walking out on her. She later spoke about this heart-wrenching experience with a mixture of understanding and sorrow, reflecting, "I don't blame him for leaving. I wasn't the same person. How many weeks can someone look at you lying in bed, try to encourage you, and see no progress? You get disgusted, and that's exactly what happened. He was a weak man who couldn't handle the situation. He didn't have the time or patience to wait it out, so he just left." Her words reveal a deep awareness of the toll her condition had taken, not only on herself, but also on those closest to her. Yet they also convey the immense loneliness she felt, abandoned at a time when she needed support the most. This moment marked one of the darkest chapters of her life, a point where her physical suffering was compounded by emotional devastation. And as painful as this period was, even greater challenges loomed on the horizon, pushing her resilience to its limits. In a moment of despair and longing to mend her fractured marriage, Frances clung to the hope that reclaiming her former glory might reignite the connection she once shared with her husband. "I thought if maybe he sees me with a microphone again, he'll love me," she confessed, revealing the depth of her yearning for both her husband's affection and a sense of self-worth. Determined to stage a comeback, she envisioned her triumphant return to the spotlight as a way to bridge the emotional gap in their relationship. However, her plan took an unforeseen and devastating turn. As she prepared to return to the stage, Frances encountered a nightmare no singer could bear. She lost her voice. The physical manifestation of her emotional pain struck her in the most cruel and ironic way. The very talent that had once defined her, brought her joy, and connected her with millions of fans was suddenly stripped away. What was meant to be a bold step toward rebuilding her life and repairing her marriage became a crushing blow, deepening the already immense sense of loss and despair that Frances was battling. Her dream of reclaiming her place in the spotlight and in her husband's heart seemed further out of reach than ever. For Frances, the blows kept coming, and her situation went from bad to worse. Following nasal surgery, she made a devastating discovery. She could no longer hit an entire octave, a loss that struck at the very core of her identity as a singer. Desperate to regain her voice, she endured 3 additional painful surgeries, each one bringing hope, only to be met with crushing disappointment as none of them succeeded. The cumulative weight of these setbacks broke her spirit. Her voice, which had been the defining element of her career and her sense of self, now seemed irreparably damaged. Reflecting on this heart-wrenching period, she admitted, "I lost my mind already, and now I lost my voice." These words captured the profound despair she felt as her life, once filled with music and achievement, spiraled further into tragedy. It was a devastating chapter that underscored just how deeply intertwined her identity was with her ability to sing, a loss she would struggle to come to terms with. Frances desperately wanted to keep the chaos surrounding her life under wraps, believing that secrecy was the only way to maintain some semblance of control. However, she soon discovered that keeping such a significant secret came at a steep price. Determined to conceal the devastating truth about losing her voice, she chose not to confide in anyone, not even her closest friends and confidants, including the legendary Frank Sinatra. This decision to stay silent led to a ripple effect of complications. By shutting out the people who cared for her, Frances inadvertently created a web of lies and unspoken struggles, isolating herself further. Her determination to preserve her dignity and protect her reputation meant disappointing those who had always supported her. Unbeknownst to Frances, Sinatra, who had always admired her talent, was about to make a deeply heartfelt and sincere request. His timing could not have been worse, as her silence about her condition placed her in an agonizing position. By keeping her struggle a secret, Frances found herself cornered, with her relationship with Sinatra and perhaps others at risk of being permanently strained. Secrets, she would learn, often come with heavy consequences. Frank Sinatra once made a heartfelt request to Connie Frances, asking her to sing her iconic song Mama as a tribute to his late mother Dolly, who'd been a dear friend of Frances and her family. The performance was to take place at a special tribute in Las Vegas, but to Sinatra's surprise, Frances declined. She later gave a puzzling explanation for her refusal, reflecting on the depth of her relationship with Dolly. She explained, "Hurt, Dolly, and I were very close. Our families were close enough to sit together and listen to dirty Italian records. That was the hardest thing I've ever had to do." While her words captured the deep emotional bond she shared with Sinatra's mother, her decision to decline the tribute remained enigmatic. The combination of fond memories and the emotional weight of the moment seemed too much for her to bear, making it a decision she would later describe as one of the most challenging of her life. Fortunately, Frances's dark period was nearing its end. By 1978, after 3 agonizing years of harboring her painful secret, she finally began to regain her voice and confidence. With her vocal cords healing and her spirit reignited, Frances wasted no time returning to the recording studio. Determined to make her mark once again, she embraced a fresh approach to her music, experimenting with new styles and showcasing her versatility. One notable venture was her exploration of disco, incorporating this vibrant and trendy genre into some of her classic songs. But Frances didn't stop there. She also leaned into one of her signature strengths, her linguistic abilities. Always eager to connect with her global audience, she recorded tracks in multiple languages, including Japanese, Italian, and Spanish. This multilingual approach not only highlighted her adaptability, but also reinforced her status as a beloved international star. Her comeback wasn't just about reclaiming her career, it was about proving to herself and the world that she could rise above her struggles and shine brighter than ever. This creative rebirth marked a triumphant new chapter in Frances's storied career. Fortunately, Connie Frances found a way to transform her grief into resilience, adopting a positive outlook that became a turning point in her life. Reflecting on her struggles, she remarked, "I realized there were suddenly a lot of broken homes. I couldn't afford the luxury of self-pity anymore." This realization pushed her to move forward, determined to show the world that she was still standing despite everything she had endured. Frances put on a brave face and returned to doing what she loved most, singing and performing. Immersing herself in her craft, she embarked on tours, and embraced her passion for entertaining audiences. One particularly notable performance took place during the American Bandstand 30th Anniversary special episode, held in the same town where she had once endured the harrowing and life-changing experience in the hotel. Her presence on that stage was not just a testament to her enduring talent, but also to her incredible strength and determination to reclaim her life and career. However, the burdens Frances had tried to suppress would come back to haunt her, teaching her that unresolved pain could have devastating consequences. The 1980s proved to be an incredibly challenging time for the singer, as she continued to grapple with deep psychological struggles while attempting to maintain her public image. Despite her valiant efforts to push forward, the weight of her unaddressed trauma became too heavy to bear. In an attempt to alleviate her mental anguish, Frances underwent intense and controversial shock treatments, hoping they would provide some relief. Yet the treatments did little to ease her suffering, and her emotional turmoil only deepened. By 1984, the darkness she had been battling for years overwhelmed her, and in a moment of despair she attempted to take her own life. The tragic incident left her in a coma for several days, as those close to her feared the worst. This harrowing period underscored the importance of confronting one's struggles rather than burying them. For Frances, it marked a turning point, forcing her to acknowledge the profound toll her pain had taken on her life and well-being. Given the dramatic highs and lows of Connie Frances's life, it came as no surprise when Gloria Estefan proposed a movie based on her story. Excited by the idea, Frances became actively involved, helping to write the script and even taking on a producing role. Estefan had also announced plans to play the lead role, bringing further anticipation to the project. However, creative differences between Frances and Estefan soon surfaced, leading to complications that ultimately derailed the project. In 2009, the decision was made to abandon the film. Frances later explained the primary source of their disagreement, saying, "I wanted the writer Robert Freeman, who wrote that miniseries Life with Judy Garland, Me and My Shadows, but Gloria and company were unwilling to hire that writer. He was so eager to do my life story for the film, but Gloria wouldn't agree to hire him, and that was the end of that." This significant conflict marked the end of what could have been a compelling cinematic tribute to Frances's extraordinary life. The breakdown of the project highlighted the challenges of bringing such a personal and complex story to the screen, especially when differing visions are involved. Frances's risky connections to the mob, a precarious aspect of her life, surprisingly worked in her favor on one notable occasion. Her friend, the sharp-tongued comedian Don Rickles, had unwittingly insulted a mobster's date during one of his infamous roasting sessions. The mobster, enraged and ready to exact a brutal punishment, targeted Rickles, and his fate seemed sealed. However, Frances, displaying her characteristic charm and kindness, intervened. She reached out to her mob connections and pleaded for Rickles' safety, specifically requesting that they spare him from a brutal beating, especially from having his legs broken. Fortunately for Rickles, her request was granted, and the incident ended without any violence. It was a rare and fleeting moment where her ties to such dangerous individuals were used for good. Yet this favor would mark the end of the relatively benign interaction she had with the mob. As Frances would soon learn, associating with such powerful and volatile figures could come with devastating consequences. The worst of her mob-related troubles was still ahead, and it would leave a far darker mark on her life. Unfortunately, an even darker chapter was looming. As Connie Frances achieved greater success, her family's connections to the mafia began to take a dangerous turn. Her brother George, in particular, became deeply entangled in this perilous world. Straddling a fine line, he was at times working alongside them, and at other times opposing them, a treacherous and volatile path that ultimately led to an unspeakable tragedy. This shadowy aspect of her family's life brought immense pain and turmoil, leaving a haunting mark on Frances's personal story. Frances had developed thick skin over the years, a necessary armor against the countless tragedies she had endured. However, no amount of resilience could shield her from the heartbreak of losing her family, especially those she held closest to her heart, her father and brother. One fateful day, her world came crashing down with a single phone call. On the other end of the line, her father's voice trembled as he said, "Your brother's been shot." At first she clung to hope, desperately asking about the hospital, but her father's next words shattered her. "He's dead." The weight of those words was too much to bear. Frances let out a piercing scream, her pain raw and uncontainable. Then, as if trying to process the unthinkable, she sank into a chair, her mind racing to make sense of what had just happened. This moment stripped away the layers of her hard-earned toughness, leaving her vulnerable and consumed by grief. For someone who had already faced so much loss, this tragedy was yet another cruel blow, one that would leave a lasting scar on her heart. At first, Connie Frances struggled to comprehend the devastating events that unfolded. While she suspected it was connected to her family's ties to the underground world, she couldn't identify the exact cause of the tragedy. As the investigation got underway, she clung to the hope that her brother's dealings with the mafia were unrelated to what had happened. However, when the results of the inquiry came in, her hopes were dashed. The outcome confirmed her worst fears, leaving her heartbroken and deeply disillusioned. It was a painful realization that added another layer of sorrow to an already dark chapter of her life. Frances's brother was a brilliant legal mind, known for his sharpness and dedication as a partner in a law office. However, beneath his professional facade, he led a dangerous double life. On one hand, he maintained close ties with the mob, a risky association fraught with peril. On the other, he worked covertly with law enforcement as an informant, navigating a treacherous path between two conflicting worlds. Eventually, this precarious balance unraveled, and he paid the ultimate price for his dual allegiances. His murder was a devastating blow to Frances, shaking her to her core and marking a tragic turning point in her life. Yet, as heart-wrenching as this loss was, it was not the only pivotal moment in her journey. There was another, even more profound turning point that had yet to unfold, one that would forever alter the course of her story. On the night of Connie Frances's harrowing encounter with her assailant in 1974, she had been quietly opening fan mail in her motel room. Among the many letters and packages, one stood out, capturing her attention with its unusual presentation. When she opened it, she was stunned by its contents. Inside was a heartfelt and deeply personal letter from a woman who had learned about Frances's recent miscarriage. The woman's words were both shocking and heartbreaking. She offered to give her own child to Frances, explaining that she believed the singer could provide a better life for her baby than she could herself. This selfless yet tragic gesture left Frances overwhelmed, adding an emotional weight to an already devastating night. It was a poignant reminder of the deep connections her fans felt with her, even during her most vulnerable moments. Frances didn't hesitate for a second. Overwhelmed by a mixture of disbelief and excitement, she thought, "Wonderful, I have a baby." Her maternal instincts kicked in immediately, and she scrambled to contact her husband. When her attempts to reach him failed, she turned to her lawyer, even though it was 2:30 a.m. Her lawyer, barely awake, assumed she was out of her mind, but he dutifully jotted down the contact details of the mysterious fan who had promised her a child. Fueled by curiosity and anticipation, Frances wasted no time. Just an hour later, she found herself face to face with this stranger, a meeting that would prove far more unsettling than she could have imagined. The person who seemed to be gifting her a dream turned out to be an insidious figure, shattering any fleeting joy she may have felt. This encounter would leave a chilling mark, yet it was only the beginning of another bizarre chapter in her tumultuous life. Shockingly, the story took an even more unexpected turn. The man who assaulted Connie Francis that night not only violated her, but also stole her fur coat. Unbeknownst to him, or perhaps even to Francis in the chaos that followed, the letter from the woman and the photos of the baby had been tucked away in the coat pocket. In the aftermath of the traumatic ordeal, overwhelmed by the horror of what had happened, Francis forgot about the letter and the baby entirely. However, fate wasn't finished with this chapter of her life. What seemed like a tragic and forgotten moment would later resurface in a surprising and unforeseen way, bringing an extraordinary twist to an already devastating story. By mid-December, Connie Francis had all but pushed thoughts of the baby she'd been so thrilled to adopt to the back of her mind. Her excitement had waned in the aftermath of the traumatic break-in that left her emotionally shattered. But everything changed when, out of the blue, baby Joey arrived on her front doorstep. The infant was wrapped in a festive red bow, accompanied by a tiny suitcase. The moment, which might have been joyful under different circumstances, felt overwhelming for Frances, who was still grappling with the weight of her recent ordeal. "I'd always dreamed of having a baby," she later admitted, "but I found I couldn't even handle my baby." The psychological toll of her trauma made it impossible for her to step fully into the role of a mother. Reluctantly, she hired help to care for baby Joey, unable to provide the nurturing she had once yearned to give. Despite her struggles, Frances's deep desire to be a mother prevailed. Just 6 months after baby Joey's unexpected arrival, she officially adopted him, marking the start of a new chapter in her life. While the road ahead would not be easy, her decision to embrace motherhood, even amidst her inner turmoil, spoke volumes about her resilience and determination. Connie Francis's life was a tumultuous blend of soaring triumphs and devastating tragedies. From achieving global stardom with her unforgettable music, to enduring heartbreak, betrayal, and even near-death experiences, her journey was as multifaceted as the songs that made her famous. Yet through it all, Frances displayed remarkable resilience. She continually found ways to rise above the darkest moments, proving her extraordinary ability to endure and persevere. Her unwavering determination to reclaim her voice, both literally and metaphorically, stands as a powerful testament to her strength and the enduring spirit of a true icon. If you've enjoyed these stories, be sure to let us know by hitting that like button and subscribing to our channel. Don't miss out on more amazing tales. We've got plenty lined up just for you. Thanks for spending your time with us today, and we'll see you again soon. Until next time, take care.